How is it that gravity is so strong that it can hold all the oceans, buildings, and people stuck to the underside of the ball Earth, but so weak that it allows birds, bugs, smoke, and balloons to casually evade its grips completely? How is it that gravity holds our bodies clung to the underside of a ball Earth, but yet we can easily raise our legs and arms, walk or jump, and feel no such constant downward pulling force? How is it that gravity can cause planets to revolve elliptical orbits around a single center of attraction? Ellipses by nature require two foci, and the force of gravitation would have to regularly increase and decrease to keep planets in constant orbit and prevent pulling them into direct collision courses. Thomas Winship says that the sun's path is an exact circle for only about 4 periods in a year, and then of only a few hours at the equinoxes and solstices, completely disproves the might have been of circular gravitation, and by consequence all of gravitation. If the sun were of sufficient power to retain the earth in its orbit when nearest the sun, when the earth arrived at that part of its elliptical path farthest from the sun, the attractive force, unless very greatly increased, would be utterly incapable of preventing the earth rushing away into space in a right line forever, as astronomers say. On the other hand, it is equally clear that if the sun's attraction were just sufficient to keep the earth in its proper path when farthest from the sun, and thus to prevent it rushing off into space, the same power of attraction when the earth was nearest the sun would be so much greater that, unless the attraction were very greatly diminished, nothing would prevent the earth rushing towards and being absorbed by the sun, there being no counterbalancing focus to prevent such a catastrophe. As astronomy makes no reference to the increase and diminution of the attractive force of the sun, called gravitation, for the above necessary purposes, we are again forced to the conclusion that the great discovery of which astronomers are so proud is absolutely non-existent. And N. Crossland says, we are asked by the Newtonian to believe that the action of gravitation, which we can easily overcome by the slightest exercise of volition in raising a hand or foot, is so overwhelmingly violent when we lose our balance and fall a distance of a few feet, that this force, which is imperceptible under usual conditions, may, under extraordinary circumstances, cause the fracture of every limb we possess. Common sense must reject this interpretation. Gravitation does not furnish a satisfactory explanation of the phenomena here described, whereas the definition of weight already given does, for a body seeking in the readiest manner its level of stability would produce precisely the result experienced. If the influence which kept us securely attached to this earth were identical with that which is powerful enough to disturb a distant planet in its orbit, we should be more immediately conscious of its masterful presence and potency, whereas this influence is so impotent in the very spot where it is supposed to be most dominant that we find an insurmountable difficulty in accepting the idea of its existence. Heliocentrists claim the ball Earth is perpetually spinning on its axis at a mind-numbing 1,038 miles per hour, or 19 miles per second, and somehow people, animals, buildings, oceans, and other surface phenomena can stick to the underside of the spinning ball without falling or flying off. Take a ride on the Gravitron at your local amusement park, however, and notice how the faster it spins, the more you are pushed away from the center of spin, not towards it. Even if the centripetal, inward pulling force of gravity did exist, which it does not, the centrifugal, outward pushing force of the ball Earth's supposed 19 mile per second spin would also exist and have to be overcome, yet neither of these opposing forces have ever been shown to have any existence outside the imaginations of heliocentric scientists. David Wardlaw Scott says, we are not like flies which, by the peculiar formation of their feet, can crawl on a ball, but we are human beings who require a plane surface on which to walk, and how could we be fastened to the earth whirling, according to your theory, around the sun, at the rate of 19 miles per second? The famed law of gravitation will not avail, though we are told that we have 15 pounds of atmosphere pressing on every square inch of our bodies, but this does not appear to be particularly logical, for there are many athletes who can leap nearly their own height and run a mile in less than 5 minutes, which they could not possibly do if they were thus handicapped. And Crossland says, the attraction of gravitation is said to be stronger at the surface of the earth than at a distance from it. Is it so? If I spring upwards perpendicularly, I cannot with all my might ascend more than 4 feet from the ground. But if I jump in a curve with a low trajectory, keeping my highest elevation about 3 feet, I might clear a bound of space above the earth of about 18 feet, so that practically I can overcome the so-called force, pull, at the distance of 4 feet in the proportion of 18 to 4, being the very reverse of what I ought to be able to do according to the Newtonian hypothesis.